Hi, we're here at a coffee break at the Managing an International Workforce Conference at Lewis Silken in London. And I ran into my colleague from Klimt, Germany, Till. My name is Hylda. I'm from Randstreeks Deur Lawyers in the Netherlands. And we started chatting about the trend of working from home, and actually were triggered by a poll that was in the panel discussion,
Yes.
where it popped up the question on whether employers are really keen on having a stricter policy on remote working and basically wanting their employees to move back. And the striking answer was that about 60% of the employers were pretty keen on getting people back. And that's an interesting trend, I think, to see, because of course we've come from a post-pandemic now situation where people have adjusted to working remotely, and all of a sudden it's turning.
Yeah, and it's not only about having adjusted to that, but it's also, I think, the policies and the legal situation having adjusted to that and pushing towards more working from home, more working flexibly, I think. And if you look at the job market and if you look at what people expect from employers, one of the main demands is always, can I work flexibly? Can I work so it suits my own personal lifestyle, my personal arrangements? On the other hand, it's perfectly clear why employers want employees back in the office, because they are considering things like company culture, how can I have a cohesive social unit there? They want to care about employee well-being. There's statistics about employees being more prone to depression and anxiety, for example, when you're working from home exclusively. And also things like health and safety in general, but also more hard facts like turnover dropping, cost of the leases, for example, when you have huge offices but you don't really need them. So it's perfectly apparent why there should be that discussion, right? And why employers are anxious about this.
Yeah, but it's interesting that it's really a trend, because and the question is, how do employers now get their employees back to the office? And in one of the surveys that was done in the Netherlands, it was the outcome was that about 44% of employees who were working remotely from home would be willing to come back to the office if their employer provided for free lunch.
That's interesting.
So it's really interesting. So that could be one of your options, provide for free lunch.
But do you think it's more about the psychological aspect of it, like something positive, something free, or is it about the materialistic part?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not a psychologist, but it is an interesting question to look at. But in terms of social events and attracting your people back to the office, what also might help is that you have more events in your office building, rather than years ago it was always getting out away from your workplace and the office and have your events in parties somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's a tendency now that employers, do that in their office, so people can come back to the office and familiarise themselves and say, oh yes, this is actually a nice place to work.
In a strange way, you could almost say that, despite employees wanting to work from home more and more, and there's kind of this duty onto the employer to care for them and ensure that against their own interests, they are coming back to the office.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Yeah.
And you might have strange situations, like there was an article about a software company in the US that basically said, well, we're giving donations to charity for each employee who's coming to work, which of course gathered huge negative press echo because it was seen as manipulative, emotional manipulation and that. So I think it's up to each company to really decide which route do I want to go down, and what works for me, what works for my company culture.
Yeah, culture-wise. And be considerate also that you have different type of employees, each with their own character and their own needs. So, it's a cultural aspect, indeed, for employees to think about.
And since the job market is what it is, right, maybe you may not even have a choice. Even if your inner convictions may be different, you may have to look at what your candidates want actually, and not so much as what the company's interests are.
No, it is a trend, and we have to deal with it. Good to talk to you. Thanks.